Only Murders in the Building Season 4 has been going really strong over the past month, being as enjoyable as ever. And with the 5th episode releasing just the other day, we are once again at the halfway point of a season, making it the perfect time to get our ridiculously premature predictions in for who we think the killer will be. As always, correctly choosing one at this point is almost impossible. So today we will cover 5 theories as to who the killer is this season. With all the preamble out of the way, let's just get straight into these ideas. And the first of these is the brothers. Well, technically sisters and more specifically twins, but you know who I'm talking about. These two are the directors behind the movie of Only Murders in the Building within the show. And as of right now, they are the most obvious suspects. At the end of episode 5, it's heavily suggesting that they are the killers, which is why this is at the bottom of the list, because they probably won't be by the end. There's still a lot of evidence that kind of hints towards them being the killer. For example, it seems very likely that the murder was done by at least 2 people. In episode 5, we are shown that at least one of them needs to be strong enough to carry out a human and dispose of them within a couple of minutes. They fit that bill perfectly, having one of the brothers actually lift somebody in this episode to show that. And the other hint is that the bottom of one of the brothers' shoes is the same as the print seen in the killer's apartment. Because we're in the middle of the season, it may not turn out to be the case, and so it might just be a coincidence, but it's leading us to believe that. Also, they have this really weird, serious edge to them, which should not make them suspicious, but kind of does to me. Now, my next guess is Glenn Stubbins, which is Paul Rudd's second character in the show. With him having a familiar face, although it isn't the same character from the last season, I think that would just deter them from thinking it could be him. And we did even have that scene in episode 4, where he kind of states that he blames them for Ben's death.
Or I was. Till you feckers rubbed him out.
After the outburst in the pub, he does later go to them and tell them it was just putting on a show while he was in there. But what if he wasn't? If we take his supposed dislike for them at heart, it could actually be him. And since putting on that show, he seemed way too friendly, even going to visit Charles at his apartment with some free food. This isn't really a reason as to why he would be the killer, but having Paul Rudd be the killer here, when the last season he was the victim, would just be a very cool thing to do. Beyond that, I don't really have any reasoning as to why. It's just they're using Paul Rudd again for another season. I feel like if you're having Paul Rudd in there, he's got to have some major role, and I feel like that could be being the killer. Now, the next person I have on my mind is Marshall Pope, who is the writer of the film Only Murders in the Building in the show. For one, he's somebody that outwardly pushes lies about himself. Think the fake beard and the fake glasses. This could just be the imposter syndrome, but it's enough of a reason to have a little bit of mistrust there. He is also a super fan of the Only Murders in the Building podcast and loves writing and telling stories. The whole season revolves around this film being made about our podcast, and he is the main writer behind that. As we know in episode 5, previous to this, he did not get many writing opportunities, meaning he might want to do anything he can to keep this role, going as far as creating more murders for the podcast so he has more movies to write. He also has a line in episode 5 when he's helping them solve the case that claims what he's doing feels like making a sequel to his movie.
It's like I'm already watching the sequel to my movie.
Meaning, he's not even really thinking of it as a murder. He's just thinking of it as another opportunity for him to write. And he also feels like the film is his. Potentially him killing Saz was his way of creating another podcast season so that he can then eventually turn it into a movie. Now, the 4th suspect I have is Bev Mellon. And she is the producer behind the Only Murders in the Building film. And for the most part, it's similar reasons to Marshall as to why I think she could be the killer, relating to business and wanting more work and more money out of it. But I think there's more evidence to point at her than him. We see countless times throughout this season so far that she is in desperate need of a success, like a massive hit. She skipped on Barbie and we saw what happened with that film. In fact, she is so desperate for that success, she asked Mabel to create more podcasts for her so that she could make more movies. Even accepting the off-the-cuff ones Mabel gave that probably could never even turn out to be a movie. She also seems to really love guns, but not own one. So I don't know which direction to take that, but there's some involvement in guns that she has, so there you go. We also see her at the start of the photo shoot in episode 5, and then we don't see her again for the rest of the episode, and at the end of episode 5 we know what happens. There's a gunshot, presumably someone's dead or injured. The show wants you to believe it's one of the brothers, but it could be Bev because we haven't seen her in this scene at this moment. All of the other major workers behind the movie we have seen loads in this scene. She is also in charge of the whole project and oversees everything, so with things like the shoe print in the window of the apartment, she could have easily saw the shoe of the brothers and just stolen it or just purchased the same one as a way to attempt to frame them and cover herself. As well as this, she was at Saz's trainee school that even Charles couldn't remember, even when they were best friends. So how does she know about it? In the scene where they encounter her, they actually never explain it. She just waffles on and they leave. And for me, so far, that's the biggest piece of evidence I've seen in this show as to who it could be, because it's just not explained why she's there and why else would she be there. And much like Marshall, my final point is she could have murdered someone to set up the podcast for another season so she gets another movie. It's the same reasoning. Now, my last theory isn't just my ideas, but it's that there is nobody that is the killer and there is no casualties. It is all a show that's put on. This alternate theory still involves Bev Mellon as kind of the lead of it, as I believe she could have set up this fake murder for much of the same reasons as my last point, so she can get all the benefits she wants without actually having to kill someone. In this season, she has said before that she finds the podcast too confusing and would prefer a more straightforward story. And so far this season has been great, but a lot of the elements almost seem too over the top, having the ham radio and the strange cult-like group over on the west side of the building playing this strange game with the meat. It all feels like a movie. It feels put on and slightly fake. With all these elements being dramatic, the only way to get the main trio to overlook that is by killing someone close to them, because then they will believe it's real. And so they hired Saz to quite literally take the fall. Saz is someone we've seen throughout the history of the show and is a perfect character to have to do this, because she has experience in stunt work. She can make that death look as realistic as possible. It would also eliminate the need for multiple people, because she could have done the fake fall, created this authentic crime scene, and then just walked out. In return, Saz would probably get paid loads of money and could go and spend that on her stunt trainee school. This then explains why Bev would be found at that trainee school, because maybe that is where Saz is staying currently, as we did not get to explore any of the other rooms. We just went in the first one with Bev and then exited. She could have just been there to drop off some things for Saz while she stays low. Now sure, the theory is a little loose and has some holes, but I honestly think it's the most exciting one and would be such a great twist for this show. But yeah, that's my guesses as to who the killers are this season. As it currently seems like it would be most likely 2 or more people who did the crime, it could be any combinations of the ones I've listed. This video more outlines the people I think who have the most motive and suspicion as of now in the show. With that episode 5 ended, I'm sure there's plenty more story to tell this season, and all of this could change immediately. If you did happen to enjoy this video and new to the channel, please consider subscribing for more videos of the shows you love. And make sure to comment down below your suspicions of people at this moment in time. I would love to hear who you think it will be. With that said though, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.